I reject you, Hannah Brooks. 5 words. In front of everyone she loved, her wedding dress, his cold gray eyes. A bomb snapping like glass on stone, she fell. He walked away. 347 nights, alone, in a cottage at the edge of Pack land. A darkness moving out of the north. 4 wolf kingdoms already fallen. 7 perfect she-wolves failed the ancient trial. Now the Alpha King needs the woman he destroyed. He kneels in an empty office, clawing at his own chest. She walks to the lodge at dawn in her funeral dress. She does not look at him, not once. A sealed stone chamber, silver fire on her tongue. A Ravona with a band relic. The moon mark burning, warriors kneeling. A crown she never wanted. You broke me once. I promise you this time I won't be the one who bleeds. Have you ever done what you believed was right, only to watch it destroy the very thing you were trying to protect? Hold that question. Because tonight, somewhere in the pine countries of northern Montana, a broken young woman is about to answer it in ways no one in her pack ever expected. The moon 347 nights ago had been full. Hannah Brooks remembered the exact number because she had counted everyone. She had counted them the way a prisoner counts scratches on a stone wall, the way a widow counts the empty chairs at Sunday supper, the way Annie Wolf counts the days between who she used to be and who she became after the man she was supposed to love turned her into a warning. That night she had worn white. A simple linen dress her grandmother had sewn back when Silvercrest still believed in fairy tales. Her hair had been braided with wildflowers plucked from the meadow behind the old lodge. Her shoes had been borrowed. Her heart had been raw and shining and open, the way a heart can only be once in a lifetime, and only if life is generous enough to let it stay that way. Alpha Weston Cole had stepped into the ceremonial circle at moonrise. 6 feet of dark hair and quiet command, the kind of man other men lowered their eyes or eyes around without knowing why. The mate bond had snapped into place the second his gray eyes met hers. A golden thread pulled tight between 2 chests, drawn by something older than the pack, older than the mountains, older than the country itself. She had felt her wolf rise up inside her ribs, small and gray and shivering with joy. She had smiled. God. She had smiled so wide her cheeks ached from it, and then he had said 5 words. I reject you, Hannah Brooks. Not I can't accept this. Not I need time. Not I'm sorry, we'll figure this out together. Just those 5 words, plain as a rifle shot at close range, and the bond had shattered. She could still feel the success of it years later. Glass, chandelier, and falling on the ceremonial bolsters. She had gone down on both knees. Her mother had turned her face away, like she was ashamed to share a last name with the girl in the circle. Her father, God rest him, had already been 3 years gone by then, and Hannah remembered thinking in that first splintered seconds, thank the moon he isn't alive to see this. Thank the moon he doesn't have to know. That was 347 nights ago. Tonight the moon was 3/4 full and rising over the Bitterroot Range. Hannah sat on the porch of the old caretaker's cottage at the edge of Packland, the one they used to store rejected wolves the way barns store broken tools. She was 26 years old. She had a mug of black coffee gone cold in her hand. Her hair was pulled back in a rough knot, no wildflowers in it, no ribbons, nothing anyone would look twice at. And she was the last person in Silvercrest anybody expected to save them. She kept her days quiet. The Pack archive was in the sublevel of the old lodge. 3 long rooms of yellowed ledgers and packet-tied correspondence and cracked in leather bindings that smelled like wood smoke and secrets. Hannah worked down there 5 mornings a week, cataloging records nobody read. She had a small brass lamp. She had a stool with a wobble in the left leg she had never bothered to fix. She had the deep, particular silence of a room where the only witnesses had been dead for 100 years, and she had learned to be grateful for it. Silence was a kind of mercy. Silence didn't look away when she walked into it. Her mother visited once a month with pie in the same soft, worn-out sentences. You're still part of the pack, Hannah. You still belong here, which was the sort of thing you said to a stray dog you weren't planning to feed. Hannah always thanked her. She always ate a slice of the pie. She always waited for her mother to leave before she cried into the dishwater and even knees that she did less often now than she used to. Grief is a wolf that runs out of energy eventually. Even the fiercest ones lie down. Nora Whitfield was the only wolf in the whole valley who still came around because she wanted to. Nora, who worked in the pack kitchens. Nora with the rust-red hair and the laugh like a screen door slamming in July. Nora, who had shown up on Hannah's porch the morning after the rejection with a bottle of cheap bourbon and the words, "Nobody comes to this cottage from now on except me. Not on my watch." Every friendship in Hannah's life had thinned or vanished after that night. Nora's had thickened. Nora's had become a rope in the dark. Which was why when Nora came knocking on a Tuesday evening, with a cupboard cover and top in the tunnel test, bosser with hollow. 7, Hannah. 7. She wolves. Failed. All of them. Hannah set the casserole on the kitchen counter and stared at her friend. "What are you talking about?" "The trial. Whatever it is, Alpha Cole is running out of the old lodge. 7 candidates in 3 days. Every single one walked out shaking. Cecilia Wagner's people had her in the car before the door even shut." Nora paced the small room. Cecilia Wagner. Alpha's daughter out of Moonwater, perfect bloodline. Silver hair like a Sunday sermon. And she came out of there like she'd seen the devil. Nobody knows what the trial is, Hannah. Nobody. Not the elders. Not the beta. And now the council is threatening to pick a Luna for him if he doesn't finish this thing inside the month. But what nobody in Silvercrest knew, what nobody had bothered to know, was that behind that broken Omega's silence, a mind had been quietly learning things the Pack elders had forgotten centuries ago. Hannah had spent 347 nights alone with the archive. She had read every ledger in that basement. She had read letters from Lunas, 80 years dead. She had read the fine, spidery notes of old healers who had recorded pack customs long before the current elders were born. She had not learned any of it on purpose. She had learned it because the alternative was going quietly out of her mind, and she had chosen not to give her rejection that satisfactions. She looked at Nora. "That's not my problem anymore, Nora." Nora's mouth tightened. "Yeah, I'd say the same thing in your shoes. But something is coming, Hannah. Something out of the north. 4 packs gone in 6 months. Warriors dead. Alpha's dead. Whole territories turned black, and Weston Cole is running out of time." Hannah looked past her friend to the darkening window. She thought of the ledger she had read last spring. A letter from a scout in 1892 who had described a shape of moving smoke that had swallowed a homestead in the Beartooth. She had assumed it was folklore. Every archive had its ghost stories. But she had copied the passage anyway into her own notebook because something about it had stayed with her the way a bad dream stays with you into the afternoon. She said nothing. Nora studied her face and softened. "Just be careful, honey. Rumors travel down here fast. And the Alpha, whatever he's playing at, he'll come for anything he thinks might work." Nora left. Hannah didn't eat the casserole. She sat at her small kitchen table in a house full of cold, and she thought about who had once looked her in the eye and told her, in front of everyone she loved, that she wasn't wanted. She was still sitting there the next morning when the knock came. Beta Harlan Reed stood on her porch in the flat gray light of dawn. 45 years old, salt already at his temples. A man built like a barn door and about as talkative. He didn't smile. He didn't apologize. He simply said, "The Alpha requests your presence, now." Hannah's hands stopped moving over her cold coffee cup. "Request hands." Harlan's jaw twitched. "That's not for me to say, ma'am." She didn't argue. There was no arguing with the beta of a pack. She pulled on her boots and her canvas coat and followed him across the wet grass to the black truck idling on the gravel road. The whole valley was watching her. She could feel it. Doors cracked open along the row of family cabins. Curtains lifted. Rejected Omega, walking to the lodge in her work clothes at sunrise. Every gossip in Silvercrest was going to have a full plate by lunchtime. The lodge was quiet when they went in. No warriors in the training rooms. No Omegas in the kitchen. No children on the stairs. Harlan led her down the long oak-paneled hall to a door she had walked away from 347 days ago, so never expected to walk toward again. He knocked once. A voice inside said, "Send her in." She stepped through. Weston Cole stood behind the great desk. He looked worse than she had prepared herself for. His dark hair was a mess. There were shadows beneath his eyes, deep enough to hide a body in. He wore no regalia, no formal shirt, just plain black cotton and the raw animal weight of an alpha who had not slept in weeks. He looked at her the way a man might look at a photograph he had thrown away and then dug back out of the trash. He said, "Sit." She sat. She hit straight. She kept her hands folded. She kept her eyes on a spot exactly 1 inch to the left of his shoulder, because looking at him directly would have cost her something she could not afford to spend. "Do you know why I called you here?" "No, Alpha." 7 candidates. Say to yourself, sir. 7 failures, sir. The council will entrench that you to choose a Luna for me if I don't finish the trial inside the month. The old floorboards creaked under his weight. She watched the tendon jump in his jaw. Whatever he was about to say was costing him. She did not care about that. She refused to care about that. The trial isn't what they think it is. It's not about strength. It's not about bloodlines. It's about... He paused, seeing clearly. Silence stretched. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Her voice was steadier than she had expected. Somewhere in the last year she had learned to hold her voice like a rifle. Steady. No shake. He turned to face her, and for the smallest half-second, something moved behind his gray eyes. Something like regret. Something like a man who has been drowning your ear with his mouth shut. Then the mask locked back down. "Because you're going to take the trial, Hannah. You're going to be my 8th candidate." She was on her feet before she remembered she had been sitting. The words came out of her before she could stop them. "No, no, absolutely not. You rejected me in front of the entire pack. You broke our bond and sent me away to that cottage to rot, and now you want me to what? Walk back into your ceremonial circle. Let you humiliate me a second time, under the same moon. Sit down, Hannah." "I won't." His voice dropped, not raised, dropped, which was somehow worse. "Sit down, Hannah. That's an alpha's command." Her knees buckled before her brain could stop them. She sat. Her hands began to shake in her lap, and she pressed them flat against her thighs to still them. An alpha's command was binding as any rope. She could refuse it. She could stand up and walk out the door and face whatever consequence came. But he had used it. He had actually used it on her, after everything, after all of it. Something in her went cold and quiet. She lifted her eyes to meet his for the first time in a year. And what she saw there was not the alpha she had for a single golden moment on a summer night. What she saw was a man haunted, a man who had spent every night of the last 340 staring at the same ceiling she had. That should have moved her. It did not. It only clarified something. She said, low and even, "If I fail the trial, like the others, you won't fail. How can you possibly know that?" He didn't answer. He turned back to the window and dismissed her with a single flick of 2 fingers. "Dawn tomorrow." She stood. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the brass knob and did not turn around. "You broke me once, Weston Cole. Whatever this trial is, if you break me again, I promise you this. I won't be the one who bleeds for it this time."
She'll let herself.
She heard nothing behind her. Not a word, not a breath, not the sound of a chair moving. Beta Reed drove her home in silence. She did not thank him. The cottage was too quiet when she stepped back inside, too small, too full of a year of her own silence. She stood in the middle of the kitchen and did not know what to do with her hands. She had been given an alpha's command. She had been told to walk into the same building that had cost her after everything and to do it at dawn. And if she failed, if 7 better women failed before her, she would not just walk out, shaking like Cecilia Wagner had. She would walk out finished. There was nothing left in her to break. That was the awful, freeing truth. She had already been broken. All a man could do now was pick up the pieces and grind them finer. She was sitting at the kitchen table with the lamp lit against the dusk when the second knock came. It was gentler than Nora's, slower. The knock of a man who had knocked on a lot of doors in his long life and had learned to give them time to open. Old Silas Ward stood on her porch with his hat in his hands, 68 years old, weather-cracked skin, snow at his temples, shoulders still broad from a lifetime of pack service, but stooped now in the way of men who had carried too much for too many years. He had been a warrior under Weston's father. He had been a warrior under Weston's grandfather. He had buried 12 brothers of the pack, and he had never once in Hannah's whole life said anything to her that wasn't kind. He said, "I heard about tomorrow morning, Miss Brooks. May I come in?" She stepped aside. He set his hat carefully on the peg by her door and moved to the kitchen table like a man who had been in 100 kitchens like it. He accepted the coffee she poured him. He did not drink it. He set his hands on either side of the mug and studied her face with the still gray patience of a man who had learned early that the fastest way to lose a young wolf's trust was to speak too soon. Finally, he said, "You've read a lot of ledgers this year, Miss Brooks." She blinked. "How do you? Because I've read the same ones in my time. I know the smell of a wolf who's been keeping herself alive with old paper." He smiled. "Small, real. That basement was my hiding place too. 50 years ago now. When my brother died in the Cabinet Mountains, and I couldn't stand to be around a living wolf for 2 full winters. Something in her throat tightened without warning. He reached into the inside pocket of his old wool coat and drew out a book, cloth-bound, faded green. The corners softened by many hands. He set it on the table between them with the care of a man setting down a lie hole. He said, "This belonged to Luna Edith Silverbrook, Silvercrest's founding Luna," written in her own hand. Hannah stared. "Founding Luna," she managed. "Martin Silverbrook founded this pack in 1861. His Luna was an Omega, Miss Brooks, small, gray-wolfed, beta-ranked at best on any measure the elders like to use. She had no bloodline anyone approved of. She had no political weight. And she passed a trial that had defeated 3 warriors before her in a chamber under the old lodge that most of Silvercrest doesn't even remember exists anymore." Hannah looked up. The elders, the pack historians, have their reasons for what they leave in the record and what they leave out. Silas's voice was quiet, steady. The kind of quiet that has learned itself the hard way. History gets written by the wolves who like the way the story ends. Anything that doesn't fit gets folded up and tucked in a drawer. Sometimes the drawer is a basement. Sometimes it's a grave. She could not speak. He tapped one gnarled finger on the green cloth. She wrote this for herself. Not for the pack.
Not for the record, for herself.
She was doubted her whole reign, Miss Brooks. Some wolves called her the mistake. Some called her the substitute. She survived all of them by outliving them. By the time she died, Silvercrest had grown from 40 wolves to 300, and every one of them called her Luna without flinching. Because she had shown them, over years, what shown clearly means when the pack is in the dark. He paused. He looked at Hannah with the patience of a mountain. He said, "I have lived long enough to know one thing, Miss Brooks. A pack does not fall because an enemy is strong. A pack falls because its leaders are afraid of the truth. Alpha Cole is a good man, but he has been afraid of a truth for over a year now, and it has been eating him alive from the inside. Whatever he wants of you tomorrow morning, I would take that green book, and I would sit with it tonight, and I would read what a woman who was called unworthy by everyone in her own valley wrote down about worth." He stood. He put on his hat. At the door he stopped. He said without turning, "I don't know what's coming out of the north, Miss Brooks, but I know I have buried 12 brothers of this pack, and I would rather die tomorrow beside a Luna who saw us clearly than beside a Luna who looked pretty in a portrait. That's not politics, that's a soldier's math. Good night to you." He went out into the dark. Hannah stood in her kitchen with the green book in her hands. She opened it. The paper was thin and brown at the edges. The ink was iron gall, browning too, laid down in a plain hand that had known its business. She read the first page by lamplight and felt something shift in her chest that she had not felt in a year. Not hope. Hope was a word for wolves who still had something to lose. This was closer to iron, closer to a spine settling into itself. She read a page from the middle at random. The dear brother it was addressed to, dead 100 years by now. Luna Edith writing about what it was like to be doubted, about what it was like to stand up under the doubt anyway, about what it cost, about what it was worth. One line she read twice, then a third time. And then she copied it into her own notebook because she was going to need it before morning. Being Luna isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to see clearly even when the truth is uncomfortable. She closed the book. She did not sleep that night. She sat by the window and watched the moon climb through the pines. She thought about a wolf 100 years dead who had been called unworthy and had refused to accept it. She thought about a young alpha across the valley who was drowning in a decision he had made 347 nights ago. She thought about 7 perfect she-wolf wolves who had failed something Hannah did not understand and could not prepare for. She thought about her father, 3 years in the ground, and what he had told her once, sitting on the porch of this same cottage when she was 8, and had come home crying because the older boys had said her wolf was too small to matter. He had lifted her chin with one finger. He had said, "Honey, the world will tell you what you are, over and over, from now till the day you die. Your only job is to know better." At 4 in the morning, she washed her face in cold water. She dressed in a plain gray cotton dress she had not worn since her father's funeral. She braided her hair without a mirror. She pulled on her canvas coat and her boots, and she walked, alone, up the long gravel road to the lodge under a sky, just beginning to think about turning blue. She could feel eyes on her. The pack was awake for this. The rejected Omega, walking to a trial in her funeral dress at dawn. Every get-up in the valley was already writing tomorrow's version. She did not slow, she did not lift her chin. She simply walked. There is a kind of dignity that costs you everything and takes years to grow back. She had grown hers in an archive. She was wearing it now. Beta Reed was waiting at the lodge doors. He nodded her through. She did not nod back. The lodge was quieter than yesterday. Not a soul in the corridors. Even the great hearth in the main room had been left dark. Reed led her past the Alpha's office, past the council room, down a hall she had never walked, to a door she had never seen. Stone, old, iron-bound. Symbols carved along the frame that were not in English, were not in a Pack language she recognized, and she had spent a year reading the archive. Reed said, "The Alpha is inside." She reached for the ring. Reed stopped her with one hand. He said quietly, "Good luck, Miss Brooks, for what it's worth. I've seen 4 packs of survivors come down out of the north this year. Not one of them looked as calm as you look right now." She looked at him. He was a big man. He was not a soft one. He meant it. She said, "Thank you, Beta." She pushed the door open. Stone steps went down. The air changed at the 5th step, cooler, older. She descended slowly, one hand on the rough wall, the smell of wood smoke and iron and time thick in her lungs. Torches burned in old brackets, real torches, no electricity down here, and the light moved along the walls the way light must have moved for the first Luna who ever came down this stair. The chamber at the bottom was round, carved from living rock. She had read about it in the archive and had assumed the passage was allegorical. It was not. A ring of pillars, floor worn smooth, a low altar in the center bearing an old ceremonial knife, a small glass vial of silver liquid, and nothing else. Alpha Weston Cole stood by the altar. He looked, if it was possible, worse than yesterday. His eyes glowed faintly with the presence of his wolves so close beneath his skin. The alpha power that he usually kept leashed came off him now in unmasked waves, and Hanasum swelled inside her chest and wanted against her will to lower her head. She locked her knees. She kept them locked. She stood. He said, "You came. You commanded it." He winced. Actually winced. She had not thought he could still be reached. He said, "This chamber was built by the first alphas of Silvercrest in 1861 under the old lodge. It is sealed for 60. It is opened only when an alpha needs to choose a Luna through the old ways, the old ways." He picked up the small glass vial. The silver liquid inside moved of its own accord, not sloshing, turning, like it was watching the room. He held it up to the nearest torch and the light bent strangely around it. And Hannah understood in that moment whatever she was about to drink was older than the pack, older than the country, older than any word for what she was. He said, "The trial shows you 3 visions. In each one you must make a judgment. Decide who is worthy, who is false, who deserves mercy. Choose correctly, you pass to the next. Choose wrong. The trial ends. Ends how?" He didn't answer that. He said 7 candidates could not face what they saw in that vial. Their assumptions got in the way. Their certainties about the way the world should work. Cecilia Wagner chose pride over wisdom in the first vision. Others failed even earlier. He crossed the floor. He stopped a careful distance from her. He held out the vial. I think, he said, and his voice roughened, "I think you might be the only wolf in this valley who can pass this trial with an open heart, because you have already had your illusions stripped away, because you know what it is to be judged unfairly, because you know what it is to be dismissed for what you are instead of who you are." She looked at the vial, then she looked at him. She said, quiet as a bare bulb, in a small room, Don't what? Don't offer me kindness now. Don't offer me sight now. You had a year to offer me anything, you didn't. This isn't apology, this is need. Say it plain or say nothing." His jaw worked, his mouth opened, closed, opened again, he said, and it came out ruined. "I need you. The pack needs you. I don't know if I have any right to ask you for anything ever again in this life, but I am asking you, please." She took the vial from his hand. The glass was warm, warmer than the air, almost alive against her palm. She thought of Luna Edith Silverbrook, 100 years in the ground, who had come down these same stairs and drunk from a vial like this one, and had walked back up carrying a pack on her small Omega back. She thought of old Silas Ward at her kitchen table with his hat off. She thought of her father, 3 years gone, saying, "Your only job is to know better." She uncorked the vial. She lifted it to her mouth. She said, without looking at Weston Cole, "If I don't come back up those stairs the way I came down, tell my mother the pie was very good last month. Tell her I didn't die because you asked me to. Tell her I died because I decided to. She drank. The liquid tasted of moonlight and of iron and of something older than either. It went down cold. It rose up hot. It filled her chest with ice and fire, and then went with light that had no color, and the chamber began to spin, and the torches went dark. The last thing she saw was Weston Cole's face, already moving forward to catch her before she fell. Then the world was gone, and a training yard she had never seen in her life was around her. She stood on packed red dirt under a sky so bright it hurt to look at. The air smelled of blood and hot leather. 2 wolves circled at the center of the yard, one massive and black, muscled like a piece of engine, the other small and rust-colored, bleeding from 3 long tears down her flank, both panting, both at the end of a challenge that had been going on too long for either to still be alive. The black wolf snarled. His voice carried alpha power that rolled across the ring like weather. Yield. The rust-colored she-wolf bared her teeth. Never, not to a tyrant. Yield with dignity or die in dishonor. My pack will not submit to you. The black wolf lunged. The she-wolf dodged, but her hind leg was slow, and he caught her by the throat and pinned her to the dirt. His jaws were on her artery. One bite and it would be over. Hannah could smell her own heart pounding. Then a voice at the edge of the ring called out. Stop! A young man ran into the circle, barely a man. Skinny, dark-haired, no more than 18, moving with the awkward grace of a boy who had not fully grown into his own wolf yet. He put himself between the black wolf and the she-wolf on the ground. Please, he said, and his voice cracked at the edge. She's my mother. I'll yield. I'll swear loyalty to you. Just don't kill her. The black wolf let so of the she-wolf's throat. He stepped back, looked at the boy with slow, hungry consideration, and he said, You would submit where your mother would not. Yes, on the goddess. I'll serve you. Only let her live. The she-wolf on the ground struggled up on shaking legs. Blood ran off her fur into the dirt. She turned her head toward her son, and her eyes were black with grief. Lyle, no, it's over. Let it be over. It's not over, Mom. Not if you're breathing. The black wolf shifted, bones cracked and reset. A tall, scarred man in his prime stood where the wolf had been. He looked at the boy. He looked at the mother. He said, Your oath, or her life. Choose. The vision froze. Every color held. Every sound stopped. And a voice that was not Weston Cole's, and was not the black wolf's, and was not anyone Hannah had ever heard, spoke from the still air around her. It filled the training yard. It filled her chest. It filled the space behind her eyes. Who is worthy of mercy? The mother who would die for her pride, or the son who would kneel for her life? Choose. Hannah stood in the frozen ring. Her breath moved in and out. Nothing else moved. The obvious answer sat at the front of her mouth. The mother, brave, uncompromising, refusing to bow. That was what Aluna was supposed to value. That was what strength was supposed to look like in every story Silvercrest liked to tell about itself. She almost said it. Then she looked at the boy, really looked. He was shaking, his whole body. His hands were clenched at his sides so tight the knuckles had gone white. He was terrified. He was 18 years old, and he was about to swear his soul to a man he hated in front of the mother he loved, because it was the only trade the day would let him make. His whole life was going to be a slow accounting of that trade, and he was making it anyway. Hannah thought of a young alpha standing in an office in her own century, 347 nights ago, choosing what he had believed was the harder mercy. Wrong choice, wrong reasons, wrong door to walk out of. But not, she saw now with a clarity that startled her, not cowardice. She could hate a choice and still see the shape of the cost behind it. She could refuse to forgive the man and still refuse to lie about what she was looking at. She thought of Luna Edith Silverbrook. Being Luna isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to see clearly. She lifted her chin. She said, voice carried through the still yard, the sun. The word landed like a stone in still water. She kept going. Because the mother is brave, but the son is wise. The mother would die for her pride and leave her pack leaderless. Her wolves scattered or slaughtered. The son sees the whole picture. He sees that leadership is not about never bending. It is about knowing when bending saves lives. Mercy belongs to the wolf, who can carry the weight of his choice into the rest of his life without laying it down. That is the son. Not the mother. The son. The vision shattered like glass. She was on her knees in the stone chamber, breath tearing in and out. Weston Cole's hands on her shoulders, steadying her, and she did not have the strength yet to shrug him off. The torches burned again. The silver vial lay empty on the floor beside her. Her heart was pounding hard enough to hurt. He said, low, near her ear, 1 down, 2 to go. She lifted her eyes to his. Something had already changed in the way she saw him. She was not softer toward him. She was clearer. And clarity, she was beginning to understand, was going to be the most dangerous thing she had ever carried into a room with this man. She said, what happens now? The chamber answered her before he could. The light behind the altar was rising again. Slow at first, steady. The silver mist gathering above the empty vial thickened and turned and began to form the shape of a new place. A room she did not recognize. A small bed, an old woman on it, 2 figures beside her. Hannah felt her breath catch. She had only just come out of the first vision. She had barely survived it. And already the second was rising, and old Silas Ward's voice was in her memory saying, a pack falls because its leaders are afraid of the truth. Somewhere far above them, above the stone stair, above the sleeping lodge, above the tall pines of the Bitterroot Valley, the moon was setting on 348 nights, and in a chamber that had been sealed for 60 years, a broken young woman in a plain gray dress lifted her head and prepared to be shown the second thing in her life that no one had ever asked her to see. The second vision rose out of the silver mist, like heat off a summer road. Hannah's knees were still pressed into the stone of the chamber floor, but the chamber was already gone. She was standing in a small pine-walled room in a farmhouse she did not know. Late afternoon light through a west window. Yellow curtains. A cast-iron kettle on a wood stove. The smell of chamomile and something sharper underneath it, the smell that comes into house. Hama's body's been dying in it for weeks. An old she-wolf lay on the bed. Her skin was thin as tissue paper. Her breath was a thin, dry sound that stopped between every heave. 2 figures stood beside her. A healer with soft hands and gray-streaked hair pulled back at the nape. A younger man, 40, maybe, dressed like a rancher, holding his mother's hand the way a man holds a hand he is about to have to let go of. The healer's voice was quiet. There is nothing more I can do, Mr. Halloran. The cancer has gone too deep. I can ease her pain. I cannot save her. Then ease it, the son said. His voice cracked in the middle of the word ease. Please, don't let her suffer. The healer's hand hovered above a small glass bottle on the nightstand. She measured out 1 dose. She stopped. Her fingers trembled. This will end her pain. It will also end her life. Pack law says I let her pass naturally, that hastening death is forbidden, even for mercy. The law is cruel. The law protects us from those who would kill and call it healing. The old woman on the bed opened her eyes. Milky, aware. She looked at her son. She looked at the healer. Please, she whispered, and the whisper carried through the whole room. Let me go.
I am so tired. I have been so tired for so long, sir.
The son turned to the healer. I am asking you to break the law. I am asking you to show mercy. And if anyone finds out, I will protect you. On my life. Your oath will not stop them from calling me a murderer, from taking my license, from putting me out of this valley. I know. The healer's hands shook harder. She lifted the small bottle. The vision froze. The still air spoke again in Hannah's chest. Who is in the right? The healer who follows the law even when it causes suffering, or the healer who breaks it even when mercy may destroy her? Choose. Hannah stood alone in the frozen bedroom. She could hear the old woman's stopped breath as if it were her own. She could smell the chamomile. She could see on the nightstand behind the bottle a framed photograph of the son as a boy of 5, holding his mother's hand at the edge of a wheat field. Both of them squinting into a wind, both of them alive. This one was harder. She felt it the second the vision froze. The first vision had 2 clear paths and 1 right answer under the noise. This 2 right answers arguing in the same room. Law existed for a reason. Law kept wolves from killing wolves and calling it kindness. Law was the reason healers were still trusted at bedsides. Law was the reason the pack had not eaten itself alive across centuries of hard winters. She had read the archive. She knew what happened when law slipped, and yet. Hannah thought of her own year, of a law that said an alpha could reject a mate for any reason, of a law that had let Weston Cole break something the moon herself had put between them, and had let the pack look away and call it his right. She thought of every wolf in that ceremonial circle who had lowered their eyes the night her bond broke, all of them within their rights under pack law, all of them wrong. Sometimes the law was correct and cruel at the same time. Sometimes the law was the drawer where a pack folded up the truths it did not want to look at. She lifted her chin. The healer, she said. The healer who shows mercy, because laws are made to serve compassion, not to replace it, because that gave us judgment for a reason. If she had wanted us to obey without thinking, she would not have given us the ability to weep. That old woman on the bed is not a philosophy question. She is a person, and the healer is not committing murder. She is refusing to punish a dying woman with any more days than she has strength to carry. That is not law-breaking. That is what the law is supposed to be for. The vision shattered. Hannah dropped onto both palms this time. The stone floor was cold against her hands. Her lungs were emptied. Weston's hand landed on her back and stayed there, and she did not have the energy to shake it off. 2 down. 2. And something inside her was already beginning to fray at the seams, and she knew before the third mist rose that the third vision was going to be the one designed to break her. She said without lifting her head, "Magdalena Hobbs, that was the second candidate, wasn't it, the one who chose the law?" His voice was quiet above her. Yes, Hannah lifted her eyes. So the second vision is what stopped Cecilia Wagner's kind. The first vision, the pride one, and the second vision is what stopped the wolves who mistook rigidity for strength. Yes. Then what stopped the others? Silence. The mist was already lifting from the vial for the third time. Only now it did not gather over the altar. It gathered around Hannah herself. It rose along her arms. It climbed her ribs. It filled her lungs from the inside out. And when the chamber went dark this time, she went with it, and there were no pillars anymore, and no torches, and no Weston Cole, and no stone floor. She was standing in a ceremonial circle under a full August moon in Silvercrest Valley, and she was wearing a white linen dress with wildflowers I braided into her hair. No. Her body knew this circle. Her body knew this moon. Her body had already begun to sob before her mind caught up to what the trial was about to do to her. She was watching herself. The Hannah in the white dress was younger. Softer at the mouth, not softer in years, softer at the eyes. She had not yet learned to hold her voice like a rifle. Was smiling. She was radiant. She was about to open her whole chest to a man who was about to reach in and take out something he did not have any intention of keeping alive. Weston Cole stepped into the circle. The golden thread snapped into place between them. Hannah, watching, felt it in her own body a second time. It hurt in a fresh place. She had thought the pain of that bond was a thing she had already spent. She had been wrong. Pain like that was not currency you spent. It was a well you could go back to over and over, and the trial had brought a bucket. Younger Hannah's face lit like a lantern. Weston's face did not. She watched him look at her. She watched him take in the small gray wolf inside the young woman in the white dress. She watched the flicker of pain, of choice, of a decision made somewhere else, in some other room, before this moon ever rose. And then she watched him say the 5 words, "I reject you, Hannah Brooks." The bond shattered a second time. Hannah felt it in the marrow of her bones. Younger Hannah went down on both knees. Her mother turned her face away. The pack murmured. The moon kept climbing like nothing important had happened. It was the worst night of her life, and she was being made to sit in the front row of it, and she could hear herself watching, saying under her breath, "I know, I remember." Stop. Only the vision did not stop. It moved. It followed Weston. The trial pulled her out of the ceremonial circle, dragged her behind him, an invisible witness, to the Alpha's private office at the back of the lodge. She had never been in this office at that hour of that night. No one had. He shut the door. He locked it. He stood in the dark with his hands braced against the desk. And then, quietly, without a sound anyone in the lodge could hear, he began to come apart. He dropped to his knees on the rug. He clawed at his own chest with both hands, as if he could physically dig the ruined bond out of his ribs. He made a sound Hannah had never heard a wolf make. Not a howl.
Not a cry.
A raw, open animal noise from a man who had just done a thing he could not undo and was not sure he could survive. He said to the empty room, "I had to. God help me, I had to." The vision pulled her again. Now she was in a room she did not recognize. Older than the lodge, older than Silvercrest, stone walls. 3 figures in dark robes seated behind a long table. Weston stood in front of them with his hands at his sides and his shoulders squared like a soldier. Younger, not by much, but younger, some months before the ceremony, before he had ever laid eyes on her under a moon. The tallest of the 3 robed figures had a voice like a bell in a cellar. "She is your mate, Alpha Cole. The goddess has made her known to you. But the Omega cannot be your Luna. The prophecy is clear. If the Alpha of Silvercrest bonds with one so weak, the pack will fall to a darkness coming out of the north. You must reject her. You must choose strength. She is my mate. The moon chose. The moon makes mistakes. The prophecy does not. Reject her, Alpha Cole. Save your pack. Hannah, watching, felt the room around her go strange. It was not a memory Weston Cole had ever shared with her. It could not be. He had not spoken to her at all for 347 nights. And yet the trial had access to it. The trial was pulling truth out of a chamber even Weston did not know had a door. She watched a younger Weston Cole's jaw lock. She watched him swallow. She watched him say, in a voice already broken, "How long do I have to decide? Until the next full moon." She watched him walk out of that stone room and stand on a mountain trail alone at dusk. She watched him look up at the sky and try to bargain with a goddess who does not bargain. She watched him try to find a way through that did not cost him the woman he had not yet met. There was no way through. He walked back down the trail. He decided. Younger Hannah in the white dress did not know any of this was happening. Older Hannah, standing in the vision, could not stop herself from making a sound that came from underneath her voice. The vision froze. The still air, the one that had spoken twice already, spoke a third time. Who deserves judgment? The Alpha who rejected his mate to save his pack, or the Omega who was sacrificed for a prophecy she never knew existed? Choose. Hannah was shaking. She could not stop shaking. Everything she had built in the last year, every quiet dinner in the cottage, every hour in the archive, every careful step of dignity she had grown back from bare skin, had been built on top of a story she had told herself about what Weston Cole was. That story had said, "He saw me and did not want me." That story had been the ground under her feet, and the trial had just kicked the ground out. She wanted to hate him more for that than she had ever hated him for the rejection itself, because the rejection she had learned to survive, the rejection she had turned into her spine. But this was a man who had loved her enough at first sight to break himself into small pieces alone on his office rug, rather than let a prophecy come true on her back, and had done it without asking her a single question about whether she wanted to be saved that way. Understanding, she was discovering in real time, was not the same as forgiveness. Sometimes understanding was worse. Sometimes understanding took the clean fury you would peel your all night, replete it with a mess. She stood in the frozen circle. Younger Hannah on her knees on the ceremonial stones. Weston on his knees in his office. 3 robed elders behind a stone table. All of it held. She thought about who deserved judgment. She thought about it for what felt like a long time. She thought about Luna Edith Silverbrook writing at a kitchen table 100 years ago about seeing clearly. She thought about old Silas Ward pushing a green cloth-bound book across her own kitchen table 12 hours ago. She thought about her father saying, "No better." She lifted her chin, she said, and her voice came out low and both. The word rang in the still air. Both, she said again. Both deserve judgment. Weston Cole for making a choice about our future without giving me a voice in it, for believing that saving me from a prophecy was more important than trusting me with the truth, which is what an alpha does when he treats a mate like a shield instead of a partner. That is a real thing to answer for, and I answer to it too. Me. For a year of believing without asking. For accepting rejection as evidence, for letting myself be told what I was, over and over, and never once demanding the whole picture. Not once did I go to him in a year and ask why. I let the story stand because it was easier to be a martyr than a person. Both of us made choices that broke us. Both of us owe each other a real accounting. And, God help me, both of us deserve, someday, a real chance to earn something like mercy. The vision exploded into white. Hannah came back to the stone chamber screaming. Weston caught her before she hit the floor. He held her against his chest and she was too undone in that first second to push him off. She sobbed once. She stopped. Then she got very quiet in a way that was not calm, and she pushed off his chest with both hands. "You." She stepped back. "You never told me, I know. You let me sit in that cottage for a year believing I was not enough. I know. You let me carry your prophecy on my back, and you did not even give me the dignity of knowing I was carrying it." His face broke. Not for the first time, but this time in front of her. "I know, Hannah, I know. I was told the bond itself was the danger. I was told any contact after the rejection would risk it reforming. I was told if I even wrote you a letter of explanation, I would put the whole pack in the ground, and I believed them. I believed them because I was 29 years old, and terrified, and I did not know any better. And there is no version of this in which I do not deserve every word you have not yet said to me. You did not know better. I did not know better. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Cold sweat, hot tears, the taste of iron in her mouth from where she had bitten down on the inside of her cheek during the third vision. She looked at him for a long, long moment, the Alpha of Silvercrest, sleepless, ruined, still on one knee on the stone floor where he had caught her. She said, "Get up." Alphas do not kneel to me, not until they've earned the right. He got up, he stood in front of her, and it was the first time in 348 nights she had looked him full in the face and seen a man instead of a wound. A man she was not ready to forgive. A man she was not, she realized in the same beat, going to let herself hate anymore either. Both were forms of not seeing him clearly, and she had just spent an hour in the chamber under the lodge learning what clarity cost. He said, "You passed," she said. "I know. 3 visions. 60 years. You were the first. I know, Weston. I know." Silence stretched across the ring of pillars. Torchlight ticked. Somewhere far above them in the world of morning and gravel roads and packed children shouting in the yard, a bell rang the 7th hour, and Hannah realized she had been down here since before dawn. She had lost most of a morning inside a vial. She said, "Your prophecy was wrong." His head came up. 4 packs fallen in 6 months, she said, in spite of the rejection. In spite of everything you did to me to prevent it. The darkness came anyway. The elders were wrong. And whatever you paid, whatever we both paid, we paid it for a lot. I know. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long time. She said, very quietly, "Then you and I are going to have to figure out what we owe each other and what we owe this pack. Because I do not have the luxury of walking back up those stairs and sitting on my porch until you find a new candidate." I passed. That means something now. Not because I want it. Because there is a darkness coming out of the north, and I have just been shown by something older than either of us that I am the one who can see it. He nodded once. He did not speak. She turned. She walked to the foot of the stone stair. She stopped with one hand on the wall. She did not look back. She said, "I will need to speak with the council tonight. I will need every survivor report you have. I will need the archive open without restriction. I will need you to not touch me again, in kindness or in guilt or in anything else, until I say so." Understood. And Weston, yes, if you ever make another choice about my life without me in the room, I will walk out of this pack in the middle of a snowstorm, and I will not come back for you or the goddess herself. Understood. She climbed the stone stairs alone. Beta Reed was still at the top. He looked at her face, and he understood without a word being spoken between them. He opened the iron-bound door. He stepped back. He inclined his head. Not the shallow bow he had given her yesterday. A deeper one. The bow a Beta gives a Luna. She walked out of the lodge into a cold October morning, under a sky so blue it looked painted. The gravel yard was full of wolves. The pack had not gone home for breakfast. The pack had stood to the cold since dawn, waiting to see who came out of that door. Mother warriors. Old wolves leaning on their sons. Nora Whitfield near the front with her hands pressed flat to her mouth. Old Silas Ward at the back, hat in his hands, patient as a mountain. They saw her face. They saw the plain gray dress. They saw a small gray-wolfed Omega walk out of a chamber that had eaten 7 perfect she-wolves and crossed the yard on her own 2 feet without stumbling. A murmur ran through them like wind through pines. Beta Reed stepped out behind her. His voice carried across the yard, quiet and definite. "Miss Brooks has passed the trial. All 3 visions. The council will convene at sunset." Silence for 1 beat. Then 2. Then the yard erupted. Not cheers. Not yet. A pack does not cheer for what it does not yet understand. But the yard began to move. Wolves turning to each other. Wolves saying the word Omega with a new shape in their mouths. Wolves who had, 348 mornings ago, looked away when she fell, now looking at her without knowing where to put their eyes. Hannah did not stop. She walked through them. Nora fell into step at her right shoulder without a word. Old Silas fell into step at her left, and neither of them touched her, because they had both, in different lives, known what it is to walk out of a room where a piece of you had died. And they had both learned that the kindest thing you could wolf in that state was distance you did not fill with talk. She went home. She sat at her kitchen table. She did not weep. She had wept enough for 1 October. The council came to her cottage before sunset, not the other way around. That, she understood as she watched them climb her porch steps, was going to matter later. Elder Cordelia Rhodes at the front in her ceremonial gray robe, severe of eye and thin of mouth. Elder Alistair Payne behind her. Head warrior Bruno Hastings with his arms folded, healer Margaret Doyle, Beta Reed, and Weston last hanging back at the porch rail saying nothing. Cordelia's voice was cold. Miss Brooks, we have come to discuss the trial results. I passed. You did, which presents this council with a complication. Hannah looked at her over the rim of a coffee cup. Complication. An Omega has not held the position of Luna in this pack for 200 years. The Eastern allies will read it as weakness. The coastal packs will read it as insult. It will damage our standing at exactly the moment our standing needs to be strongest. Then let them read. Miss Brooks. Let them read, Hannah said again. The trial exists for a reason. 7 ranked she-wolves failed it. I passed. Either that means something or it means nothing. And if the Council of Silvercrest is going to sit in my kitchen and tell me the trial means nothing because it produced a result you find inconvenient, you should say so out loud, so I know what I am dealing with. Cordelia's mouth flattened. That is not what I said. That is what you said, Elder. It just took some polishing. Bruno Hastings coughed. It might have been a laugh. He covered it with his fist. Alistair Payne leaned forward. Miss Brooks, we are not questioning the trial. We are questioning the fit. There is history here. Personal history between you and the Alpha. The pack will find it hard to accept that a woman he rejected in a public ceremony can now stand at his side and speak with authority over their lives. Hannah set her cup down, she said, and her voice was level. I did not survive 348 nights in that cottage to be told I am now inconvenient because I did not die of it. My history with Alpha Cole is not a disqualifier, it is a qualification. It is the reason I can see him clearly. It is the reason I can see this pack clearly. It is the reason his trial that was designed to test for clarity chose me and not the 7 she-wolves you would have preferred. If the pack finds that hard, the pack can adjust. Packs have adjusted to harder things than an Omega with a spine. Silence in the kitchen. Margaret Doyle spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft. Miss Brooks, you know what 4 packs fallen to in the last 6 months? Yes. You know that a 5th is under siege as we speak. Yes. You know that if we install you as Luna, and then are wrong to have done so, we compound our exposure at the worst possible time. Yes. Do you still want the position? Hannah looked at her. The truthful answer sat at the back of her throat like a stone. She did not want the position. She had never wanted the position. She had wanted 348 nights ago. A small quiet life in a valley with a man who had loved her, and children who looked like both of them, and Sunday dinners at her mother's table, and a wolf who never had to be more than what she was. She had not been given that life. She had been given a cottage and an archive and an old green book. And now she was being asked whether she wanted a silver circlet on top of it. She said, I do not want it. And I will accept it. Because want and duty are different things, and the trial did not test me on what I want. Cordelia studied her a long moment. You would be young for Luna. 26. The average half is nearer 35. Hannah smiled. Not warmly, then I will have to learn faster than the average. Alistair Payne said, and the ceremony. Traditionally, 3 days, the full moon. Sunset tomorrow. That is highly irregular. Everything about this is irregular, Elder. The moon will manage. We do not have 3 days. If the darkness reaches our northern border during a leadership transition, we will lose the pack in the seam. I would rather be an unblessed Luna standing in defense of Silvercrest than a fully anointed Luna arriving 3 days after the funerals. Old Silas Ward, who had been standing quietly in the corner of the kitchen the whole time, and whom no one had officially invited, cleared his throat. She's right. The council may not like the pace. The valley will not care. The valley cares whether there is a hand on the tiller. Cordelia turned to look at him. You were not summoned to this council, warrior. I know, Elder. I came anyway. 50 years of service earns a man a chair by any kitchen table in Silvercrest, even yours. He crossed the room. He did not sit. He stood by Hannah's shoulder and he looked at each council member in turn, slowly suspicious of a wolf who has stared down grizzlies in the Cabinet Mountains and has never had to raise his voice about it. He said, I have fought 50 years for this pack. I have buried 12 brothers of this valley. I have served 2 alphas and half a dozen elders, some of you in this room. And I say to you now, on my name and my father's name and every man I have put in the ground, that this young woman is the one Silvercrest gets to survive with. She is not politically convenient. She is not what the Eastern allies would prefer. She has been broken in ways some of you have never been touched. and she is telling you the truth in her own kinsman, and you are answering her with etiquette. Any wolf in this room who disagrees with my judgment is welcome to challenge me for the honor of it. I am 68 years old. I am not fast anymore. But I am still here, my teeth still work, and I would rather die tomorrow in a challenge over a Luna I believe in than die next week in a valley I did not defend hard enough. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Bruno Hastings, head warrior, uncrossed his arms and stepped very deliberately to Silas's side. His voice was low. That goes for me too, elders. I am not challenging anyone in this room. I am standing in front of him. If you go for Silas, you go through me. Beta Reed, quietly, without being asked, stepped to the other side of Hannah's chair. Margaret Doyle set her hand flat on the table. Cordelia Rhodes looked at Alistair Payne. Something old and unspoken passed between them. Fear, not of Silas, of the pack. A council that had just been publicly opposed by the head warrior, the beta, the healer, and the oldest living veteran in the valley, in an Omega's kitchen, was not a council that could afford to insist on procedure. Cordelia's shoulders lowered by 1/4 of an inch. It was the closest thing to a bow Hannah had ever seen the woman produce, she said, and the word came out even agreed. Ceremony tomorrow, at sunset. Full instatement, full authority. The councils will vote on record, and the vote will be unanimous. Good, Hannah said, and Elder Rhodes. Yes. The next time you come to my house to discuss whether I am inconvenient, I will have coffee ready, but I will not have patience. Cordelia looked at her a long moment, then she inclined her head. Understood, Luna-elect. Weston stayed on the porch until the others steps gone. He did not come inside. He did not ask permission to come inside. He stood at the porch rail with his hands in his jacket pockets and he waited to be spoken to. And Hannah watched him through the kitchen window and understood for the first time that whatever remained between them, in whatever form, was going to have to be rebuilt on terms she set. Not him, not the goddess. Her. She went out on the porch. She did not offer him coffee. She stood at the far end of the rail. The valley below them was going gold in the late light. He said thank you. For not walking away. I did not walk away for you, Weston Cole. Let us be clear about that. I did not walk away for the pack. I did not walk away for 4 fallen valleys in the north I have never seen. I did not walk away because a trial older than both of us told me I could see, and I have decided that if I can see, I will not close my eyes because a man once made me sit in the dark. He nodded. He said, understood. He said, I would like, if you allow it, to earn the right to touch your hand again someday. Not tomorrow, not next month, someday. I would like to spend whatever years I have left in this pack proving I am not the man who walked out of that ceremonial circle 348 nights ago. I do not expect the mate bond. It is gone. I expect nothing you do not choose to give. I only want you to know I am not asking for it as your alpha. I am asking for it as a man who has understood, too late, that the finest thing he was ever given, he threw away out of fear of a truth he was too young to test. The valley below them held its breath. Or maybe it was just her own breath, held in her own chest, and the valley had nothing to do with it, she said, and her voice was low steady and did not tremble. I do not know yet, that is fair. I may never know. That is fair too, but I will not lie to you about it. If the day comes, I will tell you, and if the day never comes, I will tell you that too. You will not have to guess. That is more than you gave me, Weston. It is not less than you deserve, but it is more than you gave me. He accepted that the way a soldier accepts a wound. Small nod. No flinch. He went down the porch steps into the gold light, and he walked back up the gravel road to the lodge alone, and Hannah stood at the rail until his black shirt was a small dot at the far end of the valley, and then she went inside and sat back down at her kitchen table and stared at the green cloth-bound book on the top of it. She opened it at random. She read a passage about a Luna 80 years dead who had been called the substitute for 2 full winters by wolves in her own valley, and who had written in her small, clean hand, "The pack does not need me to be liked. The pack needs me to be right. I can be right without being liked. I have done it before. I will do it again. And when I am dead, they will build a small stone in the yard that says, 'Beloved Luna,' and none of the wolves who called me the substitute will remember they ever said it. Time is on the side of a wolf who does not need to be believed today." Hannah copied that one into her notebook, too. She put the notebook in the pocket of her coat. She stood. She walked into the small bedroom of the cottage that had been her whole world for a year, and she opened the closet and she took down from the back of it the green dress. Roseanne Day's sister Mitzi, no, Healer Doyle had brought it over that afternoon in a garment bag Hannah had not opened yet. She unzipped the bag now, forest green wool, silver at the cuff and collar, a cut for movement, not display. Luna Edith Silverbrook's dress, 100 years old, practical as a hammer. Beautiful in the way a good tool is beautiful. The waist would need taking in an inch, the hem was already the right length. She would wear it under the moon tomorrow at sunset. She hung the dress on the closet door where she could see it. She sat on the edge of her bed. She did not this time cry. She said aloud, to the empty room, to the woman 100 years dead, to her father 3 years in the ground, to a small gray wolf inside her own ribs who had not been asked in a very long time what she wanted. All right, I hear you. All right. Outside her window, the moon rose over the pines 3 days short of full, and somewhere north of the Bitterroots, past the last ridge Silvercrest scouts had dared ride. A shape of moving smoke crossed a ridgeline no one had a name for, and turned its slow attention toward a valley in Montana where an Omega in a plain gray dress had, that morning, when walked back up a stone stair carrying more than she yet knew she was carrying. Dawns on the second day came pale and thin over the Bitterroots. Hannah did not sleep in Silas's kitchen. She sat at his table until the wood stove burned to embers, and then she walked back across the compound in the blue hour before the sun cleared the ridge, and by the time she reached her own porch, she had a plan in her head that she did not like and could not improve. She called the whole pack to the meadow at 7. 301 wolves stood in the same amphitheater where she accepted the circlet 40 hours earlier. The stone platform was cold under her boots. Weston stood beside her in plain black. Old Silas stood at the front of the crowd. Hastings stood a pace behind him with his warriors in loose formation, no weapons drawn, no armor on, jaws set. Hannah did not raise her voice. She did not have to. The pack bond carried her. She said, "What is coming into this valley in the next 36 hours does not kill the way you have trained to be killed. It does not want your teeth. It does not want your claws. It wants your will. It feeds on the moment a wolf gives up. Every pack that fought it lost. Every alpha that stood in the ring first died first. If we do what our bodies are asking us to do, we join the 5 valleys already gone. So we are going to do the opposite." A murmur moved through the meadows. She said, "No warriors on the northern line. No alphas leading the front. No magic users burning wards. Every wolf in this valley is going to learn, in the next day and a half, how to make themselves small. Warriors, you will stand down. Ranked wolves, you will suppress your dominance. You will not fight this thing. You will let it walk past you, and you will hold. That is what I am asking. That is the whole thing." Bruno Hastings's jaw worked. He did not speak. Silas caught his eye across 10 feet of meadow and inclined his head once. Bruno exhaled. His shoulders dropped a quarter inch. It was the smallest surrender Hannah had ever seen a head warrior make, and it was the only one that mattered. Silas stepped forward. His voice was quiet, and it carried. He said, "I learned to suppress rank in 1973. Running scout in country, I am not allowed to name in this meadow. I learned it because the men I was hunting were smarter than us and would smell alpha at a mile. It is not cowardice. It is a discipline. It is the hardest discipline in this valley to learn, because it asks you to stand still while your bones are screaming to move. I'm going to teach it to every warrior in this pack in the next 20 hours. If any wolf in this meadow doubts whether the teaching matters, I invite you to look me in the eye and doubt it out loud." Nobody did. They broke into groups. Silas took the warriors to the training yard behind the lodge and started them on breathing drills, on posture, on the small internal work of pulling the alpha current back inside the ribs, where it could not be smelled by anything hunting for it. Margaret Doyle organized the sick and the wounded from the summer's border skirmishes into a small caravan bound for a hunting cabin 60 miles south, escorted by 2 Omegas and a Beta named Reader. 23 wolves in all, not children, not any wolf who could fight. The most vulnerable ones, the ones whose bodies had already failed, is who RD'd them, and who would not survive the psychological weight the thing was going to press on the valley. They left in 3 trucks under a pale gray sky at 9 in the morning. Hannah stood on the road and watched the last truck disappear around the bend and felt, in the pack bond, the small slack of 23 threads going quiet at the edge of her awareness. Still there, still hers, just far enough away to be spared. She turned back to the compound and started walking to the archive. Celeste Wagner was in the archive. Hannah stopped in the doorway. Celeste stood at the third room with a stack of old ledgers open on the reading table. She looked up. She did not startle. She said, calm as morning coffee, "Luna, I hoped I might find you here. I have been reading. There is something in the Northern Trade records I think you should see." Hannah did not move from the doorway. She said, "What are you doing in my archive at 10 in the morning?" "Reading, Luna." "You did not ask. I apologize. I assumed as observer to the council I had the run of the lodge. I will not repeat the assumption." Hannah studied her. Silver blonde hair pulled back in a neat twist. Traveling clothes traded resembled a wool skirt and a cream sweater. Fingers stained faintly with old ink. Every inch a she-wolf making herself useful. Every inch a she-wolf who had been told she was inconvenient 2 weeks ago and had come back to prove she was not. Something in the pack bond, small and cold, tightened at the base of Hannah's skull. She did not know if it was her instinct or Silas's warning from last night still living inside her chest. She could not tell them apart. She did not need to. She said, "Show me what you found." Celeste turned a ledger toward her. Silvercrest trade records, 1892 to 1895, handwritten in a neat clerk's hand. A column of northern shipments marked with a small crescent symbol. Celeste said, "These symbols track ships from a settlement in the Beartooth Range that no longer exists on any modern map. If you cross-reference with Luna Edith Silverbrook's private journals, which I understand you have access to, she names the settlement 3 times. Northwind Hollow. Wiped off the record around 1901. No explanation given. But look at the correspondence dates. The last shipment came south 4 days before the pack elders sealed the chamber under the lodge." Hannah looked at her. She said, slowly, "You have been in the archives since before dawn." "I have been in the archives since Silas Ward left the lodge to teach warriors in the training yard, Luna, which was 5 hours ago. I assumed nobody would object. I brought my own lamp." Hannah closed the ledger. She said quiet,
"Miss Wagner, step back from the table. Celeste, step back. Pact."
Hannah said, "This archive is closed to you as of this moment. You will not enter this basement without me in the room. If I find you in here again without me present, I will take it as the answer to a question I told you not to make me ask. Do you understand?" "I understand, Luna. Go find Silas. Tell him I sent you. Tell him you are to spend the rest of the day learning to suppress rank alongside the warriors. If you object, tell me now, and I will find you a different assignment. I do not object." "Good, go." Celeste went. Her footsteps on the stone stair were even and unhurried. Not offended, not eager. Just a woman doing what she had been told. Hannah stood alone in the archive and did not move for a full minute after Celeste's footsteps faded. She looked at the closed ledger on the table. She did not open it. She did not want to know, right now, whether Northwind Hollow was real. She only wanted to know that Celeste Wagner had come south from Moonwater with a suitcase full of facts and had chosen it on her first morning back in Silvercrest to walk into an Omega's private archive without asking. That was not the behavior of a wolf who had come back to atone. That was the behavior of a wolf who had come back to reach for something. And Hannah left the Orhar behind her, which she had never done in a year of working there. She dropped the key in her coat pocket. The rest of the day disappeared into the small hard work of preparing 300 wolves to do the hardest thing anyone had ever asked them to do. Silas ran the warriors through drill after drill, until Bruno Hastings looked like a man who had been broken and rebuilt in a single afternoon. Weston moved through the compound, suppressing his alpha presence in visible layers, and by evening the current that had rolled off him for 10 years was down to the flicker of a pilot light. Margaret Doyle prepared medical stations for a kind of injury she had never treated. Nora Whitfield ran the kitchen crews. Cordelia Rhodes drafted successor protocols in case the Alpha and Luna both fell. The valley moved with the quiet purpose of a small town before a hurricane, and Hannah walked through it all and felt the pack bond tighten under her sternum like a corset. At sundown, she found Silas in the training yard. The warriors had gone in for supper. He was alone, sitting on the split-rail fence with a canteen, watching the last of the light bleed out of the ridgeline. She was down beside him. She said, "Celeste was in the archive this morning." His head turned. "Slow, careful. What did she take?" "Nothing." She was reading. She had a story ready when I walked in. A very good story. About shipments from a settlement that may or may not exist. She was reading Luna Edith's private ledger, Silas. She told us about the sealed chamber under the lodge. She knew about dates I have not told the council. Silas set the canteen down. He said, "Quiet. How did she know about the chamber?" "That is exactly what I have been asking myself since I locked the door behind her." He sat with it a moment. He said, "Luna, where is she right now?" "In the warrior barracks, doing suppression drills with your afternoon group." "Good. Keep her there tonight. Assign a wolf to watch her. Do not tell that wolf why. Just tell them Celeste Wagner has trouble sleeping and needs a companion in the guest wing. Pick a wolf who does not gossip." "Bruno's man, Ellery. Ellery is a good choice. Do it now. Do it before you eat supper. Do not wait." Hannah went to Bruno's quarters and made the assignment inside for 20 minutes. Ellery was a warrior of 31, quiet, married to a woman who ran the pack's east pasture. He took the assignment without questions and without visible interest, and went to sit outside the guest wing door with a book. It was the best Hannah could do. She went back to her cottage. She ate half a bowl of Nora's stew standing at the sink. She read 6 pages of the green book and could not tell you afterward what any of them said. She lay down in her clothes at 10. She did not sleep. At 2 in the morning, the pack bond went wrong. She sat up in the dark. Something in the current under her sternum had shifted. Not a break, not yet. A wrongness. A small, hot, bright signal that had not been there 5 minutes before. She was on her feet before she thought about it. She was pulling her boots on before she had located what she was reacting to. Then she felt it clean. Weston's alpha presence was rising, not suppressed.
Boss presence.
Rising. Violet light in the compound had turned into bonfire. Every wolf in the valley would feel it. Everything outside the valley would feel it too. She was out her door and running. She hit the lodge at a full run. Warriors were already in the corridors. Silas was there, coming out of the training yard with his coat half on. Bruno was 2 steps behind Silas. Nobody spoke. The 3 of them moved together toward the Alpha's quarters. Whatever was happening was already happening. The door to Weston's private room stood open. Weston was on the floor. Not unconscious, not exactly. His eyes were open and unfocused. His hands were flat against the rug. His chest was rising and falling too fast. And the alpha current was pouring off him like heat off a bonfire, rolling up through the ceiling, up through the roof, up into the cold October night sky. A beacon. A flag. Every wolf in a 50-mile radius could feel him. Anything hunting for an alpha would be able to find him from 3 counties away. Celeste Wagner stood by the window. Her hair was still in its neat twist. Her sweater was still cream. In her hands was a small silver bowl of the kind Hannah had seen exactly once in the archive, in an illustrated plate depicting a 19th century ceremonial artifact for amplifying alpha presence during pack conflicts. Ancient, long banned, not supposed to exist in Silvercrest anymore. The bowl was smoking. Silas moved first, faster than any 68-year-old man had any business moving. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knocked the bowl out of Celeste's hands. It hit the floor and the smoke guttered and the alpha current bled off Weston in a slow, gasping wave. Weston coughed, rolled onto his side, sucked in air. Celeste's did not fight. She did not run. She stood very still with her empty hands at her sides, and she looked at Hannah across the room with an expression Hannah had never seen on her face before. Small, almost curious, not sorry. Bruno had her against the wall before Silas straightened up. His forearm was across her throat. His voice came out through his teeth. Bruno said, "Lo, you have 5 seconds to tell me what you just did to my alpha." Hannah said, "Bruno, down." Bruno did not move. She said again, quieter, with the Luna current under it. "Bruno, down. She talks to me, not to you." Bruno stepped back. His hands were shaking. He put them behind his back like a man who did not trust them. Hannah crossed the room. She stopped in front of Celeste. She said, "Talk." Celeste's voice was calm. It was not the calm of a wolf who had a plan. It was the calm of a wolf who had already made her peace with the outcome. She said, "I lit the bowl. The bowl amplifies alpha presence. It broadcast him. Yes. Why? Because if I could not be the Luna of Silvercrest, then no one who took the position from me was going to sit in that circlet quietly. Because I was told at 15 that I would be a Luna by 25. Because I was told at 23 that Weston Cole would be my match, and I built my life around it. And I came here 3 weeks ago, and I walked into that chamber, and I was told by a vision older than my great-grandmother that I was not worthy of the seat. Because a broken Omega walked into the same chamber 3 days later and walked out with the circlet I had trained my entire life for. Because that was not endurable, Luna. Because you were not endurable. Hannah did not answer. Celeste kept going. Her voice did not rise. She said, I did not think it would kill him. I thought if the pack lost confidence in his suppression, they would lose confidence in your strategy. I thought if the beacon drew the darkness to our door 6 hours earlier than expected, the council would panic and go back to traditional defense and your position would collapse and Weston would be free of you by dawn. Free of me. Yes, Silas said, very quietly from behind Hannah. You thought you were still on the guest list. Celeste's eyes flickered toward him. She did not answer. Silas said, and his voice was the softest and worst thing in the room. Girl, you have just handed that darkness the exact thing it was waiting for. Celeste looked at him. For the first time, something crossed her face that was not calm, something small, a flicker of the 28-year-old she-wolf who had been told 15 she would be a Luna by 25, and had believed it. She swallowed. She said, less certain, what do you mean? What do you mean? Silas said, darkness that's like that does not just eat power, Miss Wagner. It eats intention, it eats will, it eats the particular flavor of a wolf who has decided at 2 a.m. in another wolf's bedroom to burn a banned artifact for spite. That is a beacon you cannot put out by knocking the bowl over. You put your name in the sky tonight. You told that thing exactly where to find a wolf whose will was already for sale. Celeste's face went white. She said, I did not, you did. Silas turned to Hannah. He said in the same quiet, Luna, confine her, the far room in the guest wing with the interior lock. One warrior at the door. Do not put her in the same building as the Alpha. Do not put her in the same building as any council member. Do not put her in the archive. Hannah said, Bruno, take her. Bruno took her. Celeste did not resist. She walked between 2 warriors down the corridor with her back straight and her chin up. She did not look at Hannah as she went. Silas knelt beside Weston on the rug. Weston's breathing had steadied. His eyes had focused. He tried to sit up, and Silas put one hand flat on his chest and said, not unkindly, your current is still bleeding. Hannah went to the window. She opened it. The cold October air came in like a knife. She stood there with her hands on the sill, and she looked north across the compound, past the last of the pack cabins, past the meadow, past the ridge, and she felt in the pack bond, in the deep quiet under everything, the exact moment the thing on the other side of that ridge lifted its slow attention off some other patch of country and turned it, fully, toward Silvercrest. She said without turning, it is coming faster now. Silas said from the floor, how long? 6 hours.
Maybe.
Silas exhaled. He said softly, almost to himself, all right then. So, we do this now? She turned. She looked at him. She said, Silas, yes, Luna. I need you in the meadow at first light. I need every wolf who can stand upright. I need Weston beside me. I need Bruno's warriors in the second ring. I need Cordelia and Alistair on the platform. I need Margaret at the healer station. I need Nora at the kitchen with hot food ready for anyone who cracks. I need Ellery outside Celeste's door until this is over, I understand. And Silas. Yes. If it happens the way it happens. If it presses my bruise, I need you where I can see you. Not in the ring, on the platform beside me. Whatever it says to me, I need to be able to look up and see your face, because I cannot promise you my knees will hold. And your face last night is what kept them under me. Silas stood. He walked across the room. He took her hand in both of his the way he had taken it at the ceremony 2 nights ago. He said, quiet as prayer. I will be on that platform, Luna Brooks. You look up. I will be there. And if the day comes that you look up and I am not there, it will be because I have gone to buy you the seconds you needed. And you will not waste them. She did not answer. She could not. Dawn came at 5:47. The meadow was full by 5. Every wolf in Silvercrest stood in the ring, minus the 23 sent south, minus Celeste in her locked room, minus Ellery on the door outside it. 276 wolves in the meadow. Torches guttering in a cold wind. The moon setting behind them, 1 full day short of its peak. The eastern sky bruised blue and pink. Hannah stood on the platform in the green dress, the circlet on her hair. Weston at her right shoulder, alpha current pulled back, in tight jaw set. Silas at her left, hat in his hands. Bruno's warriors in the second ring, weaponless, hands loose at their sides, eyes on the ridge north of the meadow. Hannah too said, quiet enough that the pack bond had to carry it. It is close. Some of you already feel it. It will be here inside the hour. When it comes, it is going to press on each of you. It is going to find the smallest bruise inside your chest, and it is going to press until you crack. That is its whole strategy. If it makes you feel that resistance is stupid, that is because you are winning. Do not fight back with force. Fight back by holding on to one small thing that is not a lie. She looked at the pack, she said, Bruno, tell them your one small thing. Bruno swallowed, he said, and his voice cracked once in the middle. My sister Autumn. She is a nurse in Missoula. She writes me a letter every month on the same yellow paper. She sends us the same way, your Autumn. I have not answered is her last three. I have been busy defending this valley. I want to answer that letter. That is my small thing, Silas said. My brother Micah, buried in the Cabinet Mountains in 1974. I have not visited his grave since 1989. I have owed him that walk for 37 years. I want to walk it one more time. That is my small thing, Nora said from the kitchen porch. My grandmother's biscuit recipe. 6 ingredients. I have been meaning to teach it to my niece Marla for a decade. Marla lives in Bozeman. I want that biscuit in her hands. That is my small thing. Cordelia Rhodes said from the platform. I would like to apologize to Luna Brooks in her kitchen next week over coffee, as agreed. That is my small thing. The pack laughed. Not a happy laugh. A working one. A laugh that meant they had heard her. Then a wolf named Delia from the 3rd row said, My husband died 2 years ago and I have not been able to say his name out loud since. His name was Peter. His name was Peter. I want to be able to say his name out loud in this valley without breaking. That is my small thing. A wolf named Gabriel said, My son's moved to Seattle. I have not called him in 8 months. I want to call him. A wolf named Rosalind said, I want one more September on this porch. A wolf named Thaddeus said, I owe my father-in-law $20 from a card game in 1992. He is 83 years old. I want to pay him. The meadow was full of voices now. Small voices. Small things. Old debts and small letters and biscuits and porches and brothers. Small human things, a great old thing full of despair, would not think to look for. Hannah listened. Every voice went into the pack bond, and she carried them like coins in a pocket. Then the sky above the northern ridge went wrong. The blue and pink at the horizon curdled. The wind died. The meadow torches all leaned in the same direction at once, and there was no wind to lean into. Silas stepped closer to Hannah's shoulder without a word. The thing crossed the ridge. It looked bigger down in the valley than it had looked in the dead lands. It moved slowly, deliberately. It ate the last of the dawn light out of the sky and rolled south across the meadow toward the amphitheater. Every wolf in the ring flinched. Every wolf held. Hannah felt the first tendril of its attention find her. Little Luna, it said inside her skull. As promised, the pressure hit the pack all at once. 276 wolves staggered under the same wave. She felt it through the bond. She felt Delia forget Peter's name for one hot, terrible second. She felt Gabriel decide his son would never pick up the phone anyway. She felt Rosalind believe there would be no more Septembers. She felt Bruno feel the small yellow letters go cold in his pocket. She felt Silas hold. She felt Weston hold. She felt her own knees start to soften and remembered. From another life, an 18-year-old boy in a training yard, choosing his mother's life over his own pride. The darkness pressed harder. You are alone, it said inside her skull. You have always been alone. Your mate rejected you. Your pa watched him to do it. This valley clapped. They do not love you, little Luna. They pity you, and pity ends when you become inconvenient. You are becoming inconvenient. Feel them pull away. Hannah felt them pull away. Not in her chest, in her head. The bond was intact. The bond was singing, but the thing was making her see in her mind's eye every face in this meadow turning aside from her the way her mother had turned aside. 348 nights ago, she saw Nora turn. She saw Silas turn. She saw her own mother turn. She started to go down. She actually started to go down, and then her mother's voice from the 2nd row said out loud into the cold meadow, No. Hannah's head came up. Her mother stepped forward, chin lifted, the same lifted chin from 2 nights ago at the ceremony. She said, and her voice was old and thin, and it carried like a bell struck in a cellar, No. I turned my face away once, Hannah. Once. Under a moon 348 nights ago. And I have not stopped being ashamed of it for 1 hour since. I did not raise you to be a wolf who fell. I raised you to be a wolf who stood up. I am standing now, in this meadow, in front of this pack, and I am telling you, and I am telling anything that is inside your head right now. You are not alone. You are not alone. Silas, you are not alone, Weston said on her right. You are not alone. Nora said from the kitchen porch. Bruno said, "You are not alone." The meadow said it. 276 voices, not chanting, just saying it, each in their own timing, each in their own quite human tide. The darkness pulled back a quarter step, then it did what it had promised on the ridge yesterday. It went for the alpha, not Weston, not the head warrior. It went for Silas. Silas felt it before Hannah did. His face changed, small, almost fond. He turned to Hannah and he lifted her hand, and he kissed the back of her knuckles once, the way a soldier kisses a photograph, and he stepped down off the platform. She said, "Silas." "No," he said, over his shoulder. "I made you a promise last night, Luna." He walked into the meadow. He walked toward the darkness. He was 68 years old, and he walked like a man of 26. He walked without weapons, without armor, without howling. He walked with his hat in his hands. The darkness turned its full attention toward him. He kept walking. She could feel him in the bond. He was pulling. He was pulling on the thing. He was gathering every last shred of his own alpha current. 50 years of warrior discipline, everything he had, and he was making himself the littlest wolf in the meadow. He was making himself bait. She screamed his name. He did not turn. 10 paces from the darkness he stopped, and the pack bond carried his voice into every one of them. "My name is Silas Ward. I served this pack for 50 years. I buried 12 brothers of this valley. I lost my own brother Micah in the Cabinet Mountains in 1974. I never made a Luna in my time, but I made one now." The darkness closed on him, Silas said, and it was the last thing he said in the bond, and it was quiet, and it was for Hannah alone. "I have lived long enough to see Silvercrest with a Luna it deserves. That is all I needed. Go do the rest of it, honey." The bond went quiet where he had been, not broken, quieter than that, retired. Hannah went to her knees on the platform. The meadow went to its knees behind her, and then, because the old man had brought out the second sis he had promised, Hannah reached up with both hands, and she took the silver circlet off her head, and she had it on the platform beside her. And she opened her chest. Weston, beside her, pulled the last flicker of his alpha current in until he was, for the first time in his life, just a wolf, not an alpha, just Weston Cole of the Bitterroot Valley. Hannah opened the pack bond wide. Every wolf in the meadow felt every other wolf. Delia felt Gabriel. Gabriel felt Rosalind. Rosalind felt Thaddeus. Bruno felt his sister's letter in every pocket in the valley. Nora felt her niece Marla in Bozeman. Every private bruise every wolf of her sister's had been carrying in silence for years was suddenly held gently briefly by 275 other wolf once, not diminished, shared. The great old thing that had come to press on individual bruises and eat individual wills tried to press, and found each bruise held in a net of other bruises and could not close its jaws on any one of them. It hung in the meadow for a long moment. Then Hannah heard its voice inside her skull one last time. It said, and it was almost tender, "I will remember you, little Luna. I will come again. Some other valley, some other year." "Come when you like," Hannah said, and her voice carried out of the platform and into every wolf in the meadow. "Come when you like. Silvercrest will be standing when you do." The darkness pulled back. It crossed the ridge, and slower than it had come. It left a black scar of dead grass in a line across the meadow where it had walked. It went out of the valley the way weather goes out of a valley. By 7 in the morning, the sun was up. By 7:15, the birds had come back. By 7:30, a wolf named Rosalind said, out loud in the meadow, "Peter," and a woman named Delia was already crying. Silas Ward was gone. They found the place he had been standing. There was no body, only his hat on the ground where he had dropped it. They buried the hat in the compound yard 3 days later. 3 months later, the compound looked the same and did not look the same. The elderly wolves and the wounded had come back from the south. The valley had held its first hard frost. Bruno Hastings had answered his sister Autumn's letters, all 3 of them, in a single long letter that took him 4 hours to write. Nora Whitfield had driven to Bozeman and taught her niece Marla the biscuit recipe. Gabriel had called his son in Seattle. Rosalind had watched a September become an October, become a November on her own porch. Cordelia Rhodes had come to the kitchen catch him for coffee, and had, on the 3rd visit, said out loud the words, "I was wrong about you, Luna." Hannah's mother had come to dinner every Sunday. They did not talk about the ceremony 351 nights ago. They did not have to. A stone was set in the compound yard next to the hat. It said Silas Ward, 50 years. He bought us the seconds. Hannah stood in front of the stone often mornings. Some evenings, she did not weep at it, because she did not need to. She had wept enough for one autumn. She just stood, and she remembered his kitchen at 3 in the morning, and the ticking of the wood stove, and the way he had said her name. Weston stood beside her sometimes. Not always, never uninvited. He did not touch her hand, he did not ask. He waited. She saw him waiting, and she did not know yet what she was going to do with the waiting. But she saw it, and she did not send him away. Some nights, alone in her cottage, the small shattered thread between them, the dead bond she had carried around inside her like a splinter for 348 nights, gave a small quiet flicker of light in her chest. Not a return, not a healing, just a signal. Just a small stubborn signal that something between them had not, in the end, been quite as dead as either of them had assumed. She did not act on it. She just noticed it. She wrote a note in the margin of Luna Edith Silverbrook's green book. Bonds do not always break the way we are told they break. Some of them go quiet and wait and see if we grow. Now, before we close this valley for the night, sit with what we have watched. A woman who was told, on the worst night of her life, in front of every wolf who loved her, that she was not enough, who spent 348 nights believing it, who was then handed a circlet and a pack in a dying valley and told, now, be enough, and who did the harder thing, which is neither to accept the first sentence nor to reject the second one, but to walk between them into her own kitchen at 3 in the morning and read a book by a woman 100 years in the ground. There is a reason old men give young women books. There is a reason a 68-year-old warrior walks into a meadow without a knife. There is a reason a mother lifts her chin at the second chance she was not sure she had earned. You have lived, some of you, long enough to have made it for someone you loved without asking them first. You told yourself it was for their own good. You believed it. Maybe it was. Maybe it was not. Maybe it took 10 years or 20 or 40 to find out. Weston Cole took 348 nights to find out, which is fast by the measures of a long life. Some of us take longer. Some of us never get told. Some of us have to sit with the not knowing until the day we die. There's only one honest thing to do with that weight. Do not carry it alone. Say the name of the person you decided for out loud to someone else who loved them. Ask Mesisham if they are still living whether the choice you made for them was one they would have made for themselves. Listen, do not defend, just listen. That is what Weston learned in his office at 2 in the morning 348 nights ago, and it took him another year to say out loud. Do not take a year, take a week, take tonight, and if the person you decided for is gone, if they are in a graveyard in the Cabinet Mountains or a small stone in a compound yard or a memory in your own chest that has no headstone, say their name out loud anyway. Silvercrest learned that morning in the meadow that names spoken in company are heavier than names spoken alone. That is why Silas said Micah into the pack bond before he walked into the dark. Not for himself, for every wolf who had been carrying a name they had not said out loud in decades. How many decisions have you made in your own life for someone's own good without ever asking them? How many of those decisions have come back to you decades later in the small hours of the morning and asked to be looked at again? If you have made a hard choice you thought was right and lived long enough to see it wasn't, tell us about it in the comments below. Tell us the shape of it. Tell us what you would do differently. Someone young is about to make the same choice tonight, and your sense might be the thing that stops them long enough to ask the person in the room with them what they actually want. And if Silas Ward reminded you of someone you have lost, or someone you still have time to thank, tell us their name. Say it out loud first if you can. Then type it. Say it into the company of every stranger reading this valley's story. Because sometimes the best way to honor a wolf who bought you the seconds is to spend those seconds saying out loud the names of the wolves who never got seconds of their own. Silvercrest is sleeping tonight because an Omega in a plain gray dress refused to accept the sentence a valley wrote on her, because a 68-year-old warrior walked into a meadow with his hat in his hands, because a mother finally lifted her chin, because 276 wolves held on to small things that were not lies while a great old thing full of despair pressed on their bruises. Small things held in company outlast great old things every time. Say the name, make the call, write the letter. Pay the $20 you owe your father-in-law from a card game in 1992. Visit the grave. Teach the biscuit. Ask the question you have been afraid to ask. Do not wait. The valley is sleeping. The moon is setting. And somewhere in a small cottage at the edge of Packland, an Omega named Hannah Brooks is closing an old green book and turning off a brass lamp and lying down in a house that no longer feels too big for her. She is not alone. You are not alone. Good night from Silvercrest.